so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you a good friend and U.S. Senator, Johnny Isakson.
I'm going to make a very pointed speech today. I think all of us in the United States Senate and the Congress have the obligation to be extremely candid with the American people this year, because this is a watershed year for our country. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, where we are today in this country, we've gotten to with Republicans and Democrats together, and it's going to take Republicans and Democrats to get us out of what we're into. We have an astronomical problem, and we have reached a point where our debt is beginning to compound. We have $16.5 trillion in GDP and $16.5 trillion in debt. So every dollar we borrow now, we're going into negative territory. And every financial institution worker in this room knows what happens to the beauty of compound interest when it's on savings, but the horror of compound interest when it's on debt. And this is going to be the year we're all going to have to do our jobs, and it's not going to be pretty. But the good news is there is a solution sitting there on the shelf, because we've done enough study and enough investigation and enough special commissions. We know what it's going to take to do it. We just got to have the courage and the ability to do it. Now, at 2:30 in the morning on New Year's Day, when most of you are probably just going to bed, some of you may not have been in bed yet, but you've been celebrating the advent of the new year, I stood on the floor of the United States Senate and cast my first vote of 2013. That vote was what was known as the fiscal cliff settlement between the Vice President and Mitch McConnell. And I voted for it for the following reason. It saved American taxpayers $3.7 billion, because at midnight everybody's taxes had gone up because all of the tax code expired and went back to the pre-Bush taxes. Second thing it did for America, for Georgia's small business people and family farmers and landowners, it made permanent the estate tax exemption at $5 million indexed to inflation per person, which is $10 million for a married couple, which was a substantial improvement that it was made permanent, so you don't have to worry again about it sunsetting at the end of December every year. We fixed the AMT so that 30 million Americans are not going to fall under the alternative minimum tax, which was originally designed to collect taxes from the few Americans who didn't pay them, and now is a tax that if you itemize your deductions, you probably all come under it at one time or another, and we got that fixed. Government's problem is not how much it levies, it's how much it spends. The way we should raise our revenues in this country is to expand prosperity, so the lower tax rate is applied against a higher base. John Kennedy did it, George W. Bush did it, and we can do it again. We need to reform our tax code, and we need to do it now. Number one, in terms of spending, I want to give you a little number to remember. All discretionary spending by the United States Congress is $1.2 trillion. Yet our budget every year, or our expenditures every year, this year, are $3.7 trillion. You might ask yourself, well, where's the $2.5 trillion that you're not appropriating? It's in what's known as entitlements or benefit programs that are all on cruise control and formula driven. Whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicare, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's SSI disability, whether it's AFDC, whether it's aid to families and dependent children, whether it's food stamps, whatever it might be, those are all on cruise control. And they're benefit and formula driven. And we've got to get in there, put our head under the hood, as old Ross Perot used to say, and fix the formulas. Leverage makes real estate work. But too much leverage will put you in the can every single time. And we're at maximum 100% leverage. So what we need to do as we are spending money, we need to be making contributions against our debt and reducing over time our debt from 100% of GDP to about 80% of GDP. And there are two ways to do that. One is by not spending as much money. The other is by empowering the private sector. The better American business does, the more taxes it pays because it's prosperous. And that way you have a rising tide that lifts all boats rather than a government that wants to go around and get in your back pocket.
As an American citizen, father of three, businessman, pressures are really hard, tough. And my friends and most people I know, there's a lot of apathy about the people in Washington. They don't really care about what we go through. You're detached. I want to know, do the people in Washington, including you, do you really care about the pressure we're under here, the debt we've got that we're going to pass on to our children, or is it just all just talk?
Well, I can only speak for myself. First of all, I do care, but I'll tell you why I care. I have 3 children too. I ran a small business. I have 9 grandchildren. Both of my sons who are in the real estate business have been sued by banks on deficiencies caused by the federal government's policy changes in the Dodd-Frank. My daughter is a real estate salesperson, and we help keep their kids to help them with their expenses. I know exactly what the American people are going through, and yes, I care deeply because it's my kids. And I care about mine just like I would care about yours. I would not ever accuse a colleague of mine in the Senate for not caring. I would, though, accuse a lot of my colleagues for not paying attention, for coming up with good bullet point bumper sticker answers that they think will solve the problem or put off the question to the next day. I tried today to explain to you some hard things we're going to have to do in the American government and in our country to get our debt and our deficit back in line, and to get the attitude of the American people back up, because you just hit on the key point. When I sold houses for 33 years, and I sold a lot of houses, consumer confidence had a lot to do with what kind of year I had. And when the consumer doesn't know when the next shoe is going to drop, they don't know when the next regulation is going to pile on, they don't know what the next tax policy is going to be. You have this continuing rollover of non-permanent government action where you don't know what to count on as a business and predict. You're going to continue to have an atrophy in our economy, and I understand that. I work hard every day. One of the reasons I asked to go on the Finance Committee and finally got there is that's where you really deal with these types of issues. And I'm not the smartest guy by any stretch in the United States Senate, but I made a living. I ran a company for 22 years. I've signed the back of checks, but I've signed the back of notes as well. I know what it takes to borrow payroll on Thursday night for Friday morning. I know what it takes to pay it back. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication and commitment. So not to give you too long an answer, but I care deeply, not because I know you, but because you and I have got a parallel life. You're a small business person with 3 children, going to have 9 grandchildren one of these days. You run a business, you're trying to make ends meet. I've been there and done that, and I understand that, and I understand with my kids today.